On August 1976 of Sumter County, South Carolina, the bodies of a young man and woman lay crumpled in the grass alongside Highway 521. The victims had been shot multiple times at close range, execution style. Both were well dressed, the man in a yellow button-up shirt and blue jeans, the woman in fashionable slacks and a pink top. They carried no identification, no wallets, nothing to reveal who they were or where they came from. Investigators at the scene found only a few cryptic clues. The man had a pack of foreign cigarettes and both had distinct dental work suggesting they might be from the northern United States or Canada. The pristine condition of their hands indicated neither worked with manual labor. Local Sheriff Ira Parnell told reporters, "These two didn't belong here. They weren't locals. Nobody knows them." His words would prove prophetic as months passed with no one coming forward to identify the victims. The unknown couple became known simply as Jock Doe and Jane Doe, two nameless casualties whose files would grow cold as leads diminished and witnesses disappeared. Forensic technology in 1976 was primitive compared to today's standards. The investigation relied heavily on dental records, fingerprints, and police sketches distributed across multiple states. Despite coverage in national newspapers and features on crime television programs, the true identities of the victims remained hidden. Local law enforcement periodically revisited the evidence, hoping advances in technology might provide answers. The couple's bodies had been buried in a local cemetery, marked with simple headstones reading Male Unknown and Female Unknown. The breakthrough finally came in early 2021, when genetic genealogy, a technique that combines DNA analysis with traditional genealogical research, was applied to the case. This method had previously solved numerous cold cases, including the identification of the Golden State Killer. DNA samples from the victims were processed and compared against public genetic databases. Family trees were constructed, potential relatives contacted, and finally, 44 years after their deaths, the Sumter County Does had names: James Jimmy, Freund, 30, and Pamela Mae Buckley, 25. Freund had been from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Buckley was from Colorado Springs, Colorado. The two had apparently been traveling together when they met their tragic end in South Carolina. According to historical records uncovered after their identification, Buckley had been reported missing in 1975, a year before her death. Freund had never been reported missing at all. Their identification answered the longest-standing question in the case, but opened new ones. What were they doing in rural South Carolina? Who killed them and why? How had two people from opposite corners of the country come together only to meet such a violent end? Former Sumter County Sheriff Tommy Pope reflected, "Identifying these victims brings us halfway to justice. Now we need to find who pulled the trigger." Investigators believe the killer may have been a local man named Lonnie George Henry, who died in 1982. Henry was arrested for an armed robbery just 2 weeks after the murders and only a few miles from the crime scene. The weapon used in that robbery matched the caliber of gun used to kill Freund and Buckley. However, without Henry alive to question, and with limited forensic evidence from the original crime scene, a definitive conclusion remains elusive. The case stands as a testament to the evolution of forensic science. What couldn't be solved with fingerprints and dental records in 1976 was finally resolved through genetic technology that didn't exist until decades later. The identification of James Freund and Pamela Buckley serves as a powerful reminder that in unsolved cases, time may pass, but the search for truth continues. Their story, once relegated to unmarked graves and dusty file cabinets, has finally regained its rightful names. Yet the final chapter remains unwritten as the hunt for their killer continues. In the frozen heart of the Soviet Union's Ural Mountains, 9 sets of footprints fled into the darkness of a February night in 1959. They led away from a hastily abandoned tent, through knee-deep snow, and into one of history's most baffling mysteries. What force could compel 9 experienced hikers to slice open their shelter from the inside and rush barefoot into sub-zero temperatures, choosing certain death in the bitter cold over whatever threat they perceived inside their camp? The expedition, led by 23-year-old engineering student Igor Dyatlov, had been meticulously planned. The group from the Ural Polytechnic Institute consisted of 8 men and 2 women, all seasoned outdoor enthusiasts with significant skiing and hiking experience. Their journey through the northern Urals was classified as a Category 3 hike, the most difficult, but nothing beyond their collective capabilities. On January 28, 1959, one member, Yuri Yudin, turned back due to health issues. His departure saved his life. The remaining 9 continued toward Oderten Mountain. Their last known communication was a telegram sent on January 28th. "We are going according to plan." They never reached their destination. When the group failed to return, search parties were dispatched on February 20th. 6 days later, they discovered the hikers' abandoned tent on the slope of Koletyakal, a name that translates eerily to Dead Mountain in the local Mansi language. The searchers were immediately struck by the bizarre scene. The tent had been cut open from the inside. All the group's belongings, including shoes, warm clothing, and supplies, remained neatly arranged. 9 sets of footprints, some in sock, some barefoot, some in a single boot, led away from the tent toward the edge of the nearby forest. The first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, were found beneath a large cedar tree about a mile from the tent. They were shoeless and dressed only in underwear. Their hands were burned, and nearby branches were broken up to 15 feet high, suggesting they had climbed the tree. 3 more victims, Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin, were discovered at intervals between the tree and the tent, positioned as if they had been attempting to return to camp. Slobodin's skull showed a small crack, but doctors determined it wasn't fatal. The remaining 4 weren't found until May 4th, buried under 13 feet of snow in a ravine further into the forest. Ludmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her facial tissue. Alexander Kolovatov, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol, and Alexander Zolotaryov showed severe internal injuries. Thibaut Brignol's skull had been crushed, while Dubinina and Zolotaryov had major chest fractures that doctors compared to injuries sustained from a high-speed car crash. Yet their skin remained unbruised. The official Soviet investigation cryptically concluded that an unknown compelling force had caused the deaths. The case was promptly classified and the area closed to the public for 3 years. Some focused on natural explanations: an avalanche, katabatic winds, or hypothermia causing paradoxical undressing, a documented phenomenon where freezing individuals remove clothing due to a sensation of burning heat. Others pointed to military testing in the region, noting strange orange spheres reported in the sky by other hikers that night. More extreme theories suggested attacks by the indigenous Mansi people, though no evidence of other humans was found at the scene. Infrasound-induced panic caused by peculiar wind patterns around the mountain, or even the involvement of extraterrestrial forces. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass Incident remained obscured behind Soviet secrecy and Cold War suspicions. Then, in 2019, Russian authorities officially reopened the investigation. In 2020 to 2021, a scientific study published in Communications, Earth and Environment proposed that a small delayed avalanche could have caused the injuries and initial panic. The team suggested that unusual snow conditions formed a slab that could later collapse onto the sleeping hikers. Computer simulations showed that even a relatively small snow slab could cause the crushing injuries observed in the ravine victims. Yet this theory doesn't fully explain why the experienced hikers cut their tent instead of using the entrance, why they fled inadequately dressed, or why they didn't return for supplies after any immediate danger had passed. Alexander Kurenoy, spokesperson for Russia's General Prosecutor's Office, acknowledged when reopening the case. All of this, despite the numerous expert studies, was never explained in a manner that might satisfy everyone. 66 years later, the 9 bodies found in the snow still raise haunting questions. What terror drove these experienced outdoors people to abandon all survival instinct? What force could crush internal organs without leaving external marks? And perhaps most disturbing of all, what unseen danger might still wait on the slopes of Dead Mountain? The Dyatlov Pass Incident remains unsolved, a chilling reminder that even in our modern age of scientific explanation, some mysteries continue to defy rational understanding. On the eve of Thanksgiving 1971, a man in a business suit vanished into the night sky above the Pacific Northwest with $200,000 in cash strapped to his body, executing the only unsolved skyjacking in American history. His daring mid-air escape during a thunderstorm has confounded the FBI for over 50 years and transformed a nameless criminal into an unlikely folk hero, a phantom known to the world as D.B. Cooper. The events began on a rainy afternoon in Portland, Oregon. Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 to Seattle was preparing for its short 30-minute journey when a nondescript passenger in seat 18C handed flight attendant Florence Schaffner a note. Thinking it contained a phone number from an admirer, she initially tucked it into her pocket. The man leaned toward her and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The note revealed demands for $200,000 in unmarked bills and 4 parachutes. The passenger, who purchased his ticket under the name Dan Cooper, later misreported by media as D.B. Cooper, revealed what appeared to be a bomb in his briefcase, a battery attached to red cylinders. When the plane landed in Seattle, Cooper allowed the 36 passengers to disembark in exchange for the ransom money and parachutes. Throughout the ordeal, those who interacted with Cooper described him as calm, polite, and knowledgeable about aviation. He ordered a bourbon and soda, paid for his drinks, and even offered change to the flight attendant. With his demands met, Cooper instructed the remaining flight crew, pilot William Scott, First Officer William Radizak, Flight Engineer H.E. Anderson, and Flight Attendant Tina Mucklow, to take off again, heading for Mexico City. He specified an unusual flight configuration: maximum airspeed of 170 knots, flaps at 15 degrees, landing gear down, and flying at 10,000 feet. Somewhere over southwestern Washington, between 8:13 p.m. and 8:24 p.m., Cooper did the unthinkable. He lowered the rear stairs of the Boeing 727, a feature he seemed familiar with, and jumped into the freezing darkness during a rainstorm. The aircraft crew, isolated in the cockpit by Cooper's instructions, noticed only a change in air pressure, indicating the stairs had been deployed. Cooper disappeared into the night, facing winds of approximately 200 miles per hour and temperatures of minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit, wearing only a business suit and loafers. The odds of survival seemed impossible. The FBI launched an extensive manhunt codenamed Norjok, Northwest Hijacking. They interviewed witnesses, analyzed fingerprints, and compiled a composite sketch of the suspect. A white male, mid-40s, 5 feet 10 inches to 6 feet tall, 170 to 180 pounds, with dark hair. Despite these details and one of the largest investigations in Bureau history, Cooper's true identity remained elusive. For years, the only physical evidence of Cooper's fate was absence itself. No body, no parachute, no money found, despite extensive searches of the suspected drop zone. Then, in February 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram was digging in the sand along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, when he uncovered 3 packets of deteriorating $20 bills. The cash, amounting to $5,800, was identified as part of Cooper's ransom by serial numbers. The discovery, about 20 miles northwest of Portland, raised more questions than it answered about Cooper's landing location and ultimate fate. The FBI investigated more than 800 suspects over 5 decades. One leading candidate was Richard Floyd McCoy, who conducted a similar hijacking 4 months after Cooper, though the FBI eventually ruled him out based on physical differences. Other prominent suspects included Kenneth Christensen, a former paratrooper and Northwest employee, Lynn Doyle Cooper, identified by a niece who claimed he came home injured the night of the hijacking, and Robert Rackstraw, a decorated Vietnam veteran with parachute training. The investigation examined every detail. The cigarettes Cooper smoked, Raleigh filter tips, the clip-on tie he left behind, which contained particles suggesting he worked in a chemical or metallurgical environment, and even the nature of the money found in 1980. Some experts believe it was planted rather than carried there by natural river processes. In July 2016, the FBI officially suspended active investigation of the case, stating that their resources would be better utilized on other matters. Special Agent in Charge Frank Montoya, Jr. explained, "Although the FBI will no longer actively investigate this case, should specific physical evidence emerge related to the parachutes or the money taken by the hijacker, individuals with those materials should contact their local FBI field office." Cooper's true identity and fate remain unknown, but his impact on aviation security is undeniable. The Cooper vanes were installed on all Boeing 727s to prevent the rear staircase from being lowered in flight. Air piracy laws were strengthened, and airlines began screening passengers and their luggage. What makes the Cooper case particularly mesmerizing is its perfect balance of audacity and mystery. Unlike most criminals who leave behind a trail of victims, Cooper harmed no one except an airline corporation and government authorities. His preparation, execution, and disappearance were so complete that even with the full resources of the United States government devoted to his capture, he vanished without a trace, except for a bundle of waterlogged bills that only deepened the mystery. Whether he survived the jump or perished in the attempt, Cooper achieved something few criminals ever manage. He disappeared completely, leaving behind only his pseudonym and the enduring question: who was D.B. Cooper? And what happened to him after he stepped into the night sky? If you found these stories as compelling and disturbing as I did, please take a moment to subscribe to Murder and Mystery HQ and join our community of mystery seekers. Hit that notification bell to ensure you never miss a case. Let me know in the comments which of these mysteries haunts you the most, or if you have theories about what might have happened. Until next time, remember, not all mysteries get solved. Not all questions have answers. And sometimes, the rain keeps falling, washing away evidence but never the truth. Stay safe and stay curious.